Almost there.
Yeah, you do sound like Daddy on the phone. Yeah.
You may have to go wave at him.
We're live.
Hey.
Go for it.
You are the high enchilada of miscellany. That's yes. Awesome.
Go for it, Char.
Hey, everyone. And welcome to our Q&A live stream tonight. We are, again, raising money for the Navajo Nation COVID-19 Fund. So the URL for that will be showing up in chat over that way. I'm Ellery. I am the Inkworks Chief Cat Herder, keeper of many tasks, doer of all the things that Veronica isn't doing, and I help Cyan with the lore project, and am generally a Myst nerd up, down, life, right, left, and sideways. So that's me. On to V.
Okay. Hi. Once again, for the people who saw last night, I'm V Hamilton. I am the primary developer for Unwritten, and one of the 3 people in charge of Inkworks. Also, another one of the people on Cyan's lore archiving project. You know, people saw me, you know, gesticulate wildly last night, so hopefully we've got some questions that we can go for. So, Vinny.
Hello, my name is Leonard Balsera. I am the lead designer of Fate Core, which was the system that Unwritten used. I was a developmental editor on the Unwritten book and a writer and a you know, general design consultant and you know, adventurer, comedian.
Wise sage on the mountain.
Yeah, well, I mean, the on the mountain part is right. But yeah, so I'm here in that in case anyone has any questions on that side of things.
Sounds great.
So I guess I'll start out at, you know, just throwing out to chat if there's any, you know, burning questions that you've got that you really want answered right this very second, with the understanding we, can't tell you anything about what Cyan's doing because I don't know how Firmament's going. They're going to have to tell you. If you have questions about Unwritten, throw them our way. We've got stuff we can talk about, but we're kind of interested in what you guys want.
Do we want to start off with something and then come to questions, or anything come up?
So I think it'd be cool to talk about why we went to Cyan in the first place and said, hey, can we make a role-playing game out of your IP? That's kind of an odd thing. Most people think of Myst as being very solitary and very, you're by yourself where there's nobody else. So the idea of making it into a role-playing game, there was questions. Mm-hmm. So I know from my end, the thing that I come back to the most is something that I said at Mysterium before we were even talking about Unwritten, and that was that there is just so many stories still out there that could be told from the perspective of the people running around in Uru and the explorers and the people doing the things. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to tell more stories. Since we didn't have Uru to go tromping around in, I wanted a way to keep exploring.
Want me to try?
Sure.
Okay. I actually had a very specific thing that occurred to me while playing Myst Online, during the episodes and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of, sort of churn in the community about, well, how should we do this? And we don't get to show up at the same time as the DRC. And how can we be a part of this if we're not there when the official people are there, et cetera, et cetera. And I, as a role player and a LARPer and that sort of thing, I went, we need GMs. Because, GMs are creating those sort of stories, out of, essentially nothing all the time. And so as Uru sort of slowed down, I started kind of looked at it, it's like, I have these two big parts of my life. I've got, on one hand, I've got the role playing, and on the other hand, I've got Myst. And we really kind of need to, like Ellery said, to keep the stories going. And there are so many places that we could make stories. There's just so much room. Narratively and figuratively. That it was. I thought, okay, how can I combine these two things and kind of give something to the Uru community, and give something to the gaming community simultaneously. But the idea is like maybe we can get more people into Myst and Uru if there's a role-playing game, and maybe we can get more people in Myst and Uru into role-playing if there's something that looks like something they're familiar with. And I went to Cyan with that idea. And originally my thought was just sort of like, I'm going to do this fan thing. Will you, mention it sometime or something like that? And they went, this is pretty good. We'll come up with, we'll write or something. We'll write like a contract or something. And you should probably try to make some money off this too. And I went, oh, I'm really doing this now. And then realized I had to kind of decide that, no, I'm really going to do this. And, that's when, the sleepless nights began.
The sleepless nights and the sheer terror.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Watching people put money on the Kickstarter, and it's like, wow, people are putting money behind my idea. I better really deliver.
Right. I know it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. That was an incredibly surreal experience watching the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we knew with the Kickstarter that we would get the hardcore Myst fans that will buy anything Myst. And we knew we would get the hardcore Fate fans that would buy anything Fate. We didn't realize, A, that there was an overlap. And I don't think we realized how many people would respond to the idea of a Myst RPG with, oh my God, where has this been all my life? That was
exactly.
That was completely out of the blue.
And
I mean, it was an awesome idea. But
and the number of people we ran into who, like when we would, like where we had like an Uru shirt on, or like going to the game store and having a Myst t-shirt on it, and the number of people, no matter where we went, go, I remember that game. I mean, tellers at the bank, people randomly running into us, at Goodwill, people walking down the street. And so it was just another one of those, there's people remember, and people really love the game, and so it just kind of faded into the background. I know that we met Lenny because we had made an announcement on some of the Fate groups saying, hey, we're going to be doing a game, and and that came to Lenny's attention, and he contacted us. So I don't know, you want to talk about what you thought about when you saw that the Myst game was a Myst role-playing game was happening?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my first thought was how, and why, because like you said, Ellery, right? Just one of the interesting things about the property is that a majority of the content is sort of absent of the human drama that drives a role-playing game. Like, it was really when Uru happened that became a really key part of like what the franchise could encompass, right? Like it, like so it was, it's kind of interesting. It's like lonely wandering through interesting spaces, sort of by definition, can't be a role-playing game, at least not in the sense that most people think about it, right? But as soon as Uru happened, all of a sudden it just sort of like blew it up. So when I heard that that y'all were interested in making a role-playing game, the first thing that I thought was, how are they going to tune it to what audience is it that they're gonna try to hit? Because there are so many different audiences that sort of comprise like Myst fandom. That's a lot of masters to serve, right? So so my first thought was, good luck. like that's gonna be tough, right? But then I started thinking about it from a design perspective, and what I thought that it really gave the opportunity to do was to do, the first one of the interesting things about the setting is there's no combat. Like, people don't solve problems with violence, or when violence occurs, it's like an aberrant, sort of terrible kind of an action. So I'm like, how do you do a sort of completely non-violent, role-playing game but still have this sort of structure of action adventure fiction where you're going to places and solving problems and doing stuff. And I got to think about that a little more, and I'm like, oh yeah, the world building stuff that was in, Dresden Files and some of the stuff in Atomic Robo could really work for stuff like age creation and blah blah blah. And I just started to, like, it just sort of stayed in my design brain and started clicking around in there. And I think it's sort of, the idea grew on me as I started realizing the design potential in it, right? Because that's the lens that I tend to come through, because most of my work in the industry is as a systems developer, a mechanics developer. So and I know that was sort of part of like what drove, if I remember correctly, via a lot of our original conversations about it, where a lot of it was just me going, how do you plan to do this? Okay, that's interesting. How do you plan to do this other thing? do you realize you're gonna have to do this other thing? And then you're like, oh. I was like, yeah, see. And and fortunately, like I guess, I mean, how, like, where did you? What was the point at which you decided that you needed to to hire me basically to do developmental work on it? Like, what was that process like?
Sure. And after we answer this question, we do have a couple of questions from the chat.
Great.
Cool.
But part of it was the fact that we had some of these kind of discussions, in the background about these things, and I definitely wanted to make sure that I was doing, I was giving people, a good product with a solid foundation,
Right.
and as you're one of the developers of the system I was basing it off of. So I mean, and both you, not only that, you are a Myst fan,
Right.
just as Lenny's a nerd as much as the rest of us.
Well,
and
maybe not as much as the rest of you. Like, you've gone deep in the weeds on some lore stuff before in conversations where I've been like, I kind of remember this stuff. Oh Lord!
I remember a conversation where in the middle you were talking about antagonists and such, and you said, "And like Kadish, what's up with that guy?"
Right.
And just out of nowhere, like, okay, dude, he knows Kadish. He understands why Kadish, why you want to go to Kadish and go, what is up with you?
Right.
Thank you.
Oh yeah. I mean, and we came to the Kickstarter with I did have a manuscript done, and it was okay. And I wanted to have it under other eyes. And Lenny pointed out, like, yeah, this is okay, but have you really have you really dug into it and want to show show Myst? And that led to a complete rewrite, which is why the Kickstarter was late.
So it's my fault. It's what
it's Lenny's fault, but I think that the result was significantly better, to the 25 better.
Like, there's a nerd reference.
Yeah, I know. I figured that out. So I don't know if you want to add into that, Ellery.
After the initial like squeeing fangirling that happened, like, oh God, Lenny, Senpai noticed me.
Oh God.
It wasn't a really hard decision. It was like, we can do this. We should do this. This is going to make this system and this idea tighter and stronger and just overall better, because I know so many of those early conversations were us going, well, here's what we're trying to do, and here's our idea, and Lenny going, yes, and what if you tweak this here, and what if you, and just giving us that set of eyes on it from a perspective that I'm not particularly mechanically, game mechanic inclined. I'm the story, I'm the background, I'm the world building. And V does pretty good with the mechanics and stuff, so we'd occasionally get completely caught in the weeds of wait, these are these things are conflicting. I want to go this way, she wants to go this way.
Right.
So having that set of eyes to really give us a solid foundation was amazing, and it was, when it became a possibility, it was a complete no-brainer.
Well, right. What surprised me was the moment that it turned to that, right? Because at first it was just sort of talking, like, was a Myst fan. I'm like, oh, it's really interesting. So he's doing a Myst RPG, having these conversations, and then like there was a moment. I don't remember what the exact moment was, but there was a moment where the tenor of the conversation flipped to, what if we just threw money at you to actually do this? And I was like, oh, now we're having this conversation. Cool.
Yeah.
So
I think it wasn't flipping ours. It's like, we could can we hire him? Would he be okay with that? Would he be okay with us throwing money at him? I mean, that's kind of a silly question.
For the record, so that I can say this in the public record, I am almost always okay with people throwing money at me. Just in case anyone out there wants to do that.
Write that down.
Throw
Okay.
money at one.
So okay, we do have a couple questions. The
Sweet.
first one comes from, and I'm gonna get this the pronunciation wrong. I apologize. The Warcran Archival. That's the name there. How did the panic of sleepless nights during dev compare to the panic of preparing for your live demo with Rand? So for those of you who don't know, Geek Girl Con a couple of years ago, for the Myst 25th anniversary, Ellery and Cyan worked together to do a booth at Geek Girl Con, and get Rand on the panel. And part of that was that we had a session of Unwritten with Rand playing as one of the players, it was. It was definitely daunting in the sense of like, oh, here's his baby, and he's going to be seeing my interpretation of his baby, and he may not like it. But Rand is also one of the most laid back people I've ever met, and he's luckily as we've been part of the community and the people who've been to Mysterium several times, who've managed to see Rand, and talk to him, and Rand is just Rand is awesome. He'll talk to everybody forever because he likes talking to people. Mysterium was incredibly late one year because he kept talking to everybody that wanted his signature, and so the line was long and it didn't move forward because he was busy chatting with everybody. So Rand is not intimidating because he's such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's
but
really
sort of I'm about to show my reinterpretation of his life's work, his magnum opus so far, and I was like, oh, okay, let's see how this goes, and it turned out to work really well. Rand is a sort of a natural role player. He just got right into it right away. He came into the game with ideas of what he wanted to do. He already had a character in mind, and he rolled with it just like the rest of us. So it was awesome.
It was more intimidating finding out that Philip Shane was going to be there for me, because I was doing, all the cat herding of getting, figuring out where the booth was going to be and coordinating with Geek Girl Con and then saying, okay, we've got this big media thing and this camera crew is going to be following this person around. What do we need to deal with that? And it worked out, but that was even a little bit even more intimidating than, I'm going to work with Rand, because I've worked with Rand before. But I got a documentary that was
but yeah,
that's permanent posterity's sake sort of thing.
So here's the next question. This is from Aussie. Thank you, Aussie. Hi, Aussie. Aussie's sort of there's a fifth Beatle. Aussie's like the kind of the fourth spoke of Inkworks. So thank you for being there, and thank you also just for giving the question. The breakthrough of realizing that combat is just another form of conflict/striving is a really interesting breakthrough. What led to that? And I would actually say it came the other way around. The role-playing game industry is very focused on combat because I think it's a very easy metaphor to get. It's like, I hit him, well, I hit him back. I hit him, I take his stuff. The industry is very used to that. And then realizing that, and a lot of takes in the industry on how do we do other things have been, how do we relate it to combat? The concepts of social combat and mental combat and economic combat. And so the idea was, like Lenny said, Myst isn't about that. Myst is about solving problems in different ways. So it was sort of, how do we drop the idea of combat as a central idea?
Yeah.
And it turned out to be easier than most people expect. Partially due to Fate's general philosophy of sort of, building the rules you need at the time you need them. I always saw Fate as sort of like a really complex set of Legos. And then it's like, okay, well, I need a spaceship. Click, look, a spaceship. And they give you some instructions, and sometimes you're just like, no, I want to make my own spaceship. It's really, really good for that. So when I took a look at it and just said, okay, well, we don't want to do things through combat. It's like, well, the other tools were there. We just had to kind of use them.
One of the big things was the language we used and the metaphor. I mean, so much, like you were saying, in existing role-playing games was everything was related to combat. Even when they were talking about something that wasn't physical combat related, they were using combat and conflict related terminology. And we found that when we could shift that language, my favorite topic of the thing, when we could reframe those concepts into non-combat based language, it really fell into place. Some of the mechanics you could totally just flip it around and say, yes, I could use this to hit somebody in the face. But we're using the concept to discover something. We're using the concept to investigate something. We're using the concept to explore something. And just that shift in language made it much easier to suddenly see, how do we do this mechanically?
Yeah, I mean, there are several things in Unwritten which are pretty much what Lenny and the others who wrote Fate put into the Fate RPG book, except I just reworded it. And just to sort of, especially we get to some of them like some of the deeper stuff, and some of the more technical stuff. I'm just like, no, it's the mechanic is almost exactly the same. Let's just change how we're looking at it, and now it's no longer a fight. It's a it's a challenge to overcome. It's it's you against the environment, etc., etc.
I see Lenny twitching too.
Oh, I just like what I remember about all of that work is the moment where it dawned on V that she had permission to make a lot of those adjustments, because I remember if I remember correctly, there was one draft of the book that had the combat rules in it.
The very first draft, yeah.
Right. And I remember having a conversation, an early development conversation, where I was like, why is this here? and V was like, yeah, I mean, I don't really want it there, but I mean, it's part of the rules of Fate, so I mean, it's Fate system, blah blah blah. And I'm like, just get rid of. You don't want even to give people the option to like take that road in this game, right? Because like part of what makes Unwritten interesting to play is that you can't just haul off and punch somebody and try and solve your problems that way, right? Like you have to choose a more I guess humanistic approach. So I was like, that constraint will breed creativity for your players, right?
Yeah.
If you whatever, and you're like, I can just take it out. I'm like, yes, take it out.
Worried about am I messing with their formula too much?
Right.
Disrespectful. And no, we put it out there for people to hack it. Go for it.
Right. Yeah. Turns out you can, in fact, just take all the red Legos out of the Lego bucket. One of the other things that I did want to say about the specific idea of what the function of a combat system is in a role playing game is sort of it's like not only is it merely another form of like conflict, drama, whatever, right? That it doesn't necessarily you can build conflict and drama without using violence, but the other key part of it that goes into that system design is pacing. So what a combat system in an RPG really does is it slows the moment down. it's about creating a framework of detailed mechanical interactions that slow the pace of everything down. It's like saying, we don't want to spend an hour dealing with how you get to the ziggurat in the distance, because it's just you walking across open country. Like, we're not going to sit here and describe that for an hour. We're not going to do interactions like that for an hour. But as soon as we get to the ziggurat and you're trying to figure what is going on there, we want a mechanical process that mimics the amount of focus, the amount of time around the table we want to spend talking about that thing, right? Combat mechanics in RPGs are really, more than anything else, a form of pacing mechanic. And when they did the shifting away from violence for Unwritten, a lot of that work began by asking the question, what are the moments of play that we want to zoom in on? What are the moments of action in this game where we want to spend the most time at the table talking about what happens and describing what happens, and having the surprise of unexpected results. And so it's like, on the one hand, it's about like reframing sort of the language of conflict and what it even means to have conflict, and then on the other side of it, there's this pacing thing of like, what parts of this experience do we want to slow down and really luxuriate in, and what parts do we want to glide way over?
There's a part in the Unwritten book where I talk about how to be awesome in the unwritten way. And the help everyone be awesome thing is something that's in the Fate main book. It's one of the jobs of everyone at the table is to help everyone be awesome. And after having some of these discussions with Lenny, I'm like, okay, what does that mean for Myst? What's awesome in Myst? And it's figuring out stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's also the trope of what was it? One of the, God, I forget which writer it was. When the story gets boring, send in someone shooting a gun.
Oh yeah, the two, right? That's that's not Dashiell Hammett. That's was one of the other pulp detective novelists.
And I was thinking, like, okay, well, what's that for Unwritten? What's that for Myst? And it's, here's a thing I don't know what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And those sort of things just kind of really crystallized, to me, okay, what am I trying to do? And when I really develop, very, very strong opinions about how certain things should go. I realized that in the book, I should just be opinionated and say, I think this is what we're trying to do. So try to do it that way. Violence.
I remember an early discussion where we were talking about what's the thing in the Myst games that's the hook. What's the thing? And in a lot of ways, it's that aha moment. It's that I figured it out. Oh my God. After you've been pounding your head on the keyboard for hours, that realization you've solved it. And that was something I wanted to be in there, is that moment of, yes, yay, I did it. Which I think we managed. Looks like there's a couple more questions.
Yeah. This was from Junie Girl. What advice do you have for someone who has never played an RPG before? How do I begin?
That is the
that one, punted that one to me.
Well, I figured, I've been starting with a lot of stuff, so let's,
All right.
Let's put you in the spotlight.
So this is gonna sound, really basic, but I promise you, this is probably the best advice that I can give you. Read the book and do what it says. Like, RPGs, because role-playing games are just like any other classification of game. They're like board games or video games or anything like that. Like, if you've never played a board game before, then your experience of playing that board game, your first board game, is going to be, okay, I'm going to crack this thing open and look at all the components and read the rules and sort of like, try and do it. A well-written role-playing game book should tell you, like, as the equivalent of that experience. Like don't sort of worry about the idea of being generally experienced at role-playing games or not. Like find a specific game you like that has a subject matter that you enjoy, hopefully Unwritten. Please put up the purchase link. And just try to engage that one thing. Like read that book and learn how to play that game. Beyond that, the best advice that I can give you is that role-playing games are literally like all of them pretty much boil down to you sitting around a table with a group of people talking about imaginary stuff. And like I think that a lot of people find the idea intimidating because it's presented, sometimes I think it's presented in a way that is, I don't want to say designed to intimidate, but that I think doesn't do the hobby any favors in terms of like inviting new people in, right? It's just sitting around a table talking about imaginary stuff. It's not like, if you ever been, and I promise I'll only spend a couple more minutes on this, around a table and you've made up and you have created a made up story, like you do it as like a joke, you know, can you imagine the barista at Starbucks, you know, just every time someone tries to talk, they just interrupt them with an air horn because they're so tired of dealing with customer service, right, for that day or whatever. Like what is the like the most you know, passive aggressively going postal Starbucks barista like, and then the person next to them says, oh yeah, they totally interrupt people with the air horn, and then they deliberately just make everybody black coffee no matter what they order, and then everyone laughs, and then it goes, and then the next person, and like you know, you've done this kind of thing with your friends already, where you have started some kind of a joke or a made up thing and just keeps riffing around the table because that's just what people do. Role-playing games are a really complicated version of doing just that thing. So it's like you already have the instincts in you to play just about any RPG well, so that it's just a matter of engaging with the specific content that you want and taking it one game at a time.
In a lot of ways, Uru was the groundwork. I mean, anybody who's been into Uru as themselves is in a way, you know, playing a role-playing game. Just the character is them.
Exactly.
Some of us made, you know, some of us made characters that were actual characters that weren't ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, Uru was an RPG without the dice rolls.
Yeah. And I also, you know, I always related it to, you know, playing with your kids. Those that have kids, you know, it's just like, you know, they say, you know, like, oh, well, this, you know, this is over here. This is the guy, and you know, and over here, and here's this doll right here. This is, you know, she's my friend, and she wants to talk to the guy. I mean, it's, you know, like I said, we do it all the time. I think one of the very first presentations I did Unwritten for Mysterium, I said we all tell stories. We do it all the time. It's just sometimes that, you know, there are some extra tools that we can have that we can tell stories better or quicker or with less, you know, less stress, or that give us ideas, and that's pretty much all it is.
Right. And the rules that are there to essentially give you the constraints you need to make up stuff about that specific topic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, never let the rules keep you from playing a game.
All right.
I am notorious for changing, you know, like how, you know, well, we did it this way this time. Well, this time it's a little different, so we'll change the roles, how we do the roles. And people who watch, I mean, I'm just sort of making, you know, I'm like, oh, let's roll it, see what happens. Yeah, it's an extra tool, and that's it. I mean, and you know, it's like, you know, you're gonna be doing it anyway, so you know, look for more tools, and you know, look for tools outside of role playing. You know, improvisational theater, that's a big one. You know, yes,
Improv is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, there's the idea that's come from improv of the yes and thing, which is kind of infiltrated much of role-playing games. Is you take what they say and you go, yeah, that's true, and this other thing, and that's how you keep going.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, have fun, and
sorry, I
I was
didn't mean
gonna
to
say
interrupt. Go ahead.
there's no particular way of running the game that's wrong.
Right. So that's the one thing I was gonna exactly kind of what I was gonna get at is don't worry about screwing it up.
Mhm.
Because if you do everything wrong, but you still get 3 or 4 hours of you sitting around a table with friends and making stuff up and laughing and having fun, then that's a successful experience, right? Like
Exactly.
don't get too super conscious about it. Some people recommend finding a table of experienced role players and like basically finding a group of people where everybody has played role playing games and is experienced with the medium, so that you can sit and sort of absorb everything that's happening like a sponge. Some people recommend having a group of people who have exactly the amount of experience that you do, which is none, right? And then doing like learning it all together is like a group activity. Both can be successful. So it's just sort of a matter of like your preferences, how you prefer to learn, how you prefer to.
Let's play videos on YouTube are actually
Yeah.
a really good way to, what does this look like? What does playing this game look like?
That is, thank you for that, Ellery, because I don't watch a lot of actual plays, and that's just one of my, like, I keep forgetting that those exist. So thank you for that.
Well, I think the one thing that the Let's Plays did for me the most was realizing as a GM that, that whole idea that, I wasn't, it didn't matter if I wasn't going to mess it up, because I was just watching these people, they're playing and they're talking and they're like, I don't know, what do you think? Or let me look that up. And it's just like, oh, they're just people telling stories, just like what I do. So, they're enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. Woo, I win.
Sold. All right.
Sold.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. So he says it's from Chris KB2. I don't know if you want to reveal anything you had planned for the story yesterday, since the playing is definite. But if so, what did you have prepared for the cage and the apparatus inside? So, the cage. The cage in my mind had a very specific element, purpose in the context of the world. It was a prison age, and it was a prison age, and that's where the prisoners were actually linked into, was the cage. And it was like Ryan had figured out, and it's like in Riven where you link it. That's pretty much what it was. Narratively, it was a MacGuffin. It was a thing that was there that people could focus on, and I figured someone would focus on some point, and I would see what they thought about it, and I would go, yeah, you're close. Let's go with that. And Jeremiah did just that, where he's like, oh, okay, there's got to be something special here, and we kind of riffed off of that. So I mean, in terms of the story in general, Ellery and I had worked out the base, what had happened here in general, and how these people worked, and how the age got there, and we had a couple of specific things we wanted to have happen, and some of them were big things, like the fire that happens at the end. That was something I was like, from the very beginning, there's gonna be a big fire. I had something really big planned for it, involving treating the fire as a character and having them race against the fire to try to go away, but we're out of time.
Yeah. We totally should. I think if we ever do this again, we're going to need to make it 2 sessions. I talked to V a little bit last night about possibly releasing all of our notes, polishing them up and releasing it as a GM, one page, here's an idea, but I want to make it look nice first.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was based. A lot of what happened was based on the players' reactions.
Mhm.
You know, and I think that's something that very good that Fate does, is that when the players, you know, it's that whole idea of, you know, aspects are important, and so if something becomes important, it's like, why not treat it as an aspect? And you know, so it's like, you know, they started talking about, you know, in the game, the whole thing with the smell and the spores was just a tip off to something was happening with their books. But they were like, this is dangerous. We've got to deal with it. So at the end, we started moving, you know, kind of buying into that. Like, this is a dangerous thing, and the tall guy from the village, you know, has a way to deal with it and that sort of thing. So, I mean, there is a style of role playing of GMing that does a lot. There's a lot of prep, and they map things out, which works for those people who are like that. I am not like that. And that's what brought me to Fate in the first place. Was I spent a lot of time ignoring about 90% of any role-playing book I was using, because I would just go, roll the dice. Looks big. Okay, cool. You win. And Fate enables that. It's sort of like, it gives you the extra, it's one thing, it gives you those extra tools to take that and do more with it. And so it's, you know, it's just one way of doing things.
So it sounds to me like you basically just had very loose notes about all the stuff, and then filled in, like, all of the detail work you filled in basically improvisationally as the session went along.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some specific details that we came up with. Like Ellery came up with the idea.
But
What?
There's backstory, but
Yeah.
but it didn't need to be present unless the players touched on it. So there's like a ton of stuff that they never really learned.
Yeah.
That in a bigger campaign they might have.
Yeah.
I think if we'd gone with we gave them actually 2 scenarios. We gave them little teasers about 2 different scenarios and said, which one are you guys interested in? If they'd gone with the other one, there might have been some more puzzle type stuff happening.
Yeah, and that was kind of, we kind of gave the, you know, a little more of a explorational one versus a little more of a puzzle solving one, and it decided just this time they wanted to do a little more explorational. But you know, we've run a lot of games, you know, one shots and more longer, you know, things with Unwritten where there's a lot of puzzles, you know, and they're, you know, we're, you know, people are sitting down, you know, like, you know, okay, let's take notes on what they said, and we're gonna, you know, here's your diagram and that sort of thing. So I think that's the questions we have so far. I don't know if any more have jumped in the chat again. Let's see. What do you think, Ellery?
Yes.
What do you think that people should know about Unwritten that no one's really asked yet? What's a part of Unwritten you're like, you know, this part's really important, but doesn't seem to come up as often?
I mean, there's the discovery mechanic, because that's kind of awesome and fairly unique. And there's also, I think, one of the fact that we gave a framework for people to write their own ages. So, you know, there's a way for you to make your own ages. You don't have to hit the DRC website and go, what notes did they have? You know, there's a framework for that. One of the things I've had fun doing is coming up with the different groups that exist in the cavern. What have explorers been doing? You know, how have they organized? How have they, you know, which groups have banded together? What have they been up to when there's no DRC to, you know, put cones in their way? That's fun. And that's, you know, there's a bunch of that stuff that's still, you know, simmering on the stove. You know, one thing that happened is we had some stretch goals of putting some other stuff out. And the more we worked on them, the more we realized that there was no way to do them justice within the framework of, we're just going to toss these out as little simple splat books. It was like, no, this needs much more depth and focus. And yes, that's a really good point. You don't have to be good at puzzles to be able to GM a game of Unwritten
or play it.
You don't need to have puzzles anywhere in there. You can say, you can totally say, and here is as a GM, you can say, and now you have come up against an elaborate, Denis mechanism because they love their puzzles. What skill are you going to use to open it? And just do the roll and go, okay, you succeeded. Good. You don't have to.
Right.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just like, yep. Now let's talk about how awesome that looked. All right.
Yeah.
This is it. Now he described that.
Everything goes clunk, 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 and there's flashing lights. And
Right. Yeah. The game is adaptable that way to a pretty wide variety of preferences. Right.
Yeah.
It's all about, it's all about using the tools that are there to focus in on the parts of the experience that you most enjoy. Right.
Mm-hmm. I think that as we were talking and developing, one of the things I developed a very strong opinion on and put into the book, which, I mean, I go to half the book is things V has strong opinions on, is that, people always talk about, Myst as, a puzzle game. I actually I developed the opinion that it's not a puzzle game. That rather just like in combat's a way to kind of slow the focus and kind of give some pacing. That Myst games really the puzzles are ways of sort of slowing you down and giving requiring you do certain things before you move on to the next part. And I think but we're what really brings people back again and again to Myst games as opposed to app with full of Sudoku puzzles, is that there's a reason you want to get past that gate. You want to know, okay, why are these guys trapped in these books, and why can't I talk to them clearly? And I think that was kind of the understanding is that it was Myst wasn't so much about puzzles; it was about exploring things, figuring new things out, and whether it be figuring out a puzzle or discovering what happened here, or discovering who Atris is, and why we shouldn't trust Sirius, that sort of thing. Why Kadish, what about that effing guy?
That guy.
Yeah, that guy.
I'm telling you. Well, there's also there's also kind of an interesting subtext, I think, in Myst, that like discovering stuff externally is a mirror for discovering stuff internally, right? So like there's this, it's sort of like, and I mean they sort of hit it on the head with a hammer when Yisha showed up, right? and was literally like, this journey is taking place on 2 levels, deal with it. But that's a paraphrase. That's not exactly what she said. But so that's it's interesting, right? Because it's not just sort of discovering. It's like, yeah, what is it? What is going on here? Which I think should have been the advertising tagline from Myst actually when it originally came out. Myst, what the hell's going on this island?
There's that name that comes up every once in a while. It's the Myst cover with the Myst name changed to the word what.
What? Yeah.
And every time it comes around, everybody who their friends know they play Myst, they get tagged on it. So like about every
every 6 months or so,
hey, check it out. It's like, yeah, no.
Right.
But yeah,
but like when you get, it's sort of just like, you as you sort of discover what happened to all the people and all of that, you always, it's sort of like gives you the opportunity to sort of like also reflect on like your own thoughts and your own beliefs about whatever topic is part of the thing. Internal and external discovery. I wasn't going anywhere with that. It's an interesting component of the.
Well, this brings me to another thing that V is very opinionated about. traditionally in the Myst fandom are very interested in, you know, what's canon, you know, what really happens there is, you know, what do Gara Hevti look like? These sort of things. And, you know, I'm as interested as anybody else. But as a role player and a GM, I understood that, you know, pretty much every time we make a role-playing game, you're making another version.
Right.
And you're making your own version, an alternate version. And that's kind of one of the things I was hoping to see people do with Unwritten, and have people who've run the games. You know, they take the universe, make it their own, and give it their own spin.
Yeah.
And that's really, you know, and you can do that by changing everything. You know, like, you know, Yisha was never there, and I hated the Borrow anyways, or you know, some other thing that's going on. Or you can just, I mean, there's all these little spaces between canon that you can play with.
Right. Well, and even, and I mean, this is sort of inherent to the process of making any role-playing game that is based off of an intellectual property, because you have to, because role-playing games sort of live in the spaces that are between the lines of what gets covered in a novel or a game or whatever, right? Like, you have no choice really but to speculate where necessary, and then say, that's what we're going to decide is official in this game, because we don't have enough information to know this, that, and the other, but we can logically extrapolate from these context clues that this, you know, is what this must have been like. Am I allowed to talk about the thing that I did, some of the writing that I did?
Yeah.
That hasn't been put out there yet?
Yeah, go for it.
Because Ellery was talking about having made up, you know, a bunch of stuff of like what's going on in the cavern, how the people organized themselves, blah blah blah. They had all these topics that could not be done justice in a small format, which put Inkworks in a position where they had a large number of words that needed writing on specialized topics. And they engaged what seems to be their plan, which is to call me and break glass in case of emergency. So I've actually done some writing about some of these topics that are like they're highly speculative. Like, there's a whole section I remember writing about what happens to the cavern dwellers when they decide to go back to their lives. Like, what is the social group of former cavern explorers in the surface world like? How do they engage with each other? Do they engage with the cavern still? How is it a part of their lives? We have literally no information about what all the people in the DRC are doing when they left, right? Like, they, you know, shut the lights off and, you know, went back to work at Starbucks and blow air horns at customers when they got tired of them. And stuff. So, you know, a lot of that was having to really look at in detail a lot of the in-game documentation, the journal entries and stuff like that, just to think about like how did these folks talk about their lives before the cavern, right? And like and then extrapolate from there to think about, like, you know, I started looking at accounts of people who had like made major lifestyle changes, like they went to go like live in the desert for however many days and then came back and, you know, wrote a Medium article about like what the hardest thing was to readjust back to normal life kind of stuff. Like, I read a bunch of that stuff, and but is that canon? Huh? Does it matter? I don't think it does, right? Like, you know, in that sense, right? But, you know,
we've kind of had this conceptualization for a while that like Marvel has the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
right.
We kind of have the Unwritten role-playing universe.
Right.
And it's, you know, we're grabbing what canon we have and what canon we know. And then other times we're like, no, we're going to do this.
Right.
You know, I think our biggest challenge with Unwritten is that there are so many ideas we could run with.
Yeah.
Sure. Right.
so many ideas and so many things we really do want to do, and it's just a matter of getting it done.
Right.
Yep, having enough hours in the day, balancing it with your life. Life is the worst thing that can happen to anybody who ever does a Kickstarter. And
Life
it happens recurringly. Almost every Kickstarter, has a poor interaction with life. Some more than others. But just to note, I saw one thing scroll by in the chat from Junie Girl saying essentially that RPGs is essentially the ultimate fan fiction.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely, it's fan fiction that you were working with your friends around a table or in a Zoom call, and you kind of collaboratively come up with like wow, you did that. Holy,
it's local democratized group fan fiction. That's a great way of describing it. Like and but I think that also comes back around to what you were saying about like the idea of like you can't get it wrong. Like the thing that you're making is literally for an audience of 5 people, right? Like who cares how much it diverges from like one thing or another. If the people at your table, if you 4 or 5 people like it and get into it and do that, then it's a thing for you. Like it's it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at 7-ish. I don't know if we want to take a few more questions or wrap up. I mean, you know me, I can keep talking all night long if you like.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, yeah, if there's more questions coming down the pipe, like why not?
Sure. Actually, I think I just saw one pop up.
Oh, if there's one popped up.
Yeah, and it's more of a procedural one. Is there an ideal number of players for a game?
Sorry, go ahead. Okay. Is who's going to be opinionated about this particular topic? Is it me? All right.
Yeah. Go for it.
It really depends on how much time and attention you can give everybody within the span of time that you have. I usually prefer to play with 3 or 4 players, kind of at most, is my ideal GMing for not just Unwritten, for just about any role-playing game, because I know that in a 4-hour span, which is about the length of a decent length session, I can give all of those people enough spotlight time to feel like they have engaged in a significant way. As soon as it starts getting to like 5 people and beyond, my own personal like room management like ability as a GM, like there's a danger that person number 5 or person number 6 might not end up with as much stuff to do in that time. But I've seen people do giant, like I've known people run like 7, 8, 9 person tables. I think that's baffling myself, but if they're able to do it and everybody sort of gets enough meat out of the experience to feel like they participated in a significant way and all that, then that's good. Like theoretically, like any number of players. So like instead of the ideal number of players being a number, the ideal number of players is how many people can we sit down and have talking in a room at once for this many hours, where each of them will walk away feeling like they have meaningfully participated in the game. For me, that's 3 or 4.
Yeah, and it also depends on sort of the style of game. We have things like live action role playing, or LARP. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a much more sort of it's a much bigger sort of group, and with the assumption that a lot of the interaction isn't happening between the storyteller and players, but it's happening between the players.
Right.
And so, I mean, I've been in LARPs where over 100 people.
Right.
And it worked. Of course, we had like 10 people, kind of on staff, working with it, that sort of thing, to kind of help us get things together. But those people were more interested in not necessarily doing something with the GM, but with how their characters were interacting with other characters. And I've been at LARPs where the people have not done anything but sit down around a table and talk to each other for 4 hours in character. And they're like, that was a great game. And I'll say, I sat over here the whole time. I didn't do a thing. But yeah, so I mean, there are different styles of gaming, and there are different, methods of doing it. For the tabletop, yeah. And the tabletop one, that's I kind of go with 3 to 5. That's my sweet spot.
Right, and like you said, right, a lot of that is because unlike in a LARP, a lot of the gameplay in Unwritten is mediated by interactions between the game master and the player, right? Like the game master sort of has to be there describing, okay, here's what you see around you, here's the world you're interacting with, here's how things look, here's the stuff, here's what this non-player character says to you, yada yada yada. Yeah. So it sort of means that like sort of the upper boundary is sort of limited by the GM's ability to sort of manage all of the streams of input coming in at once,
Mm-hmm. See, I don't know if I saw any other ones. I can scroll through real quick. I didn't see any other specific questions. Someone let me know if I missed one in the chat there. Let's see here. We can talk about something else, or just
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Has Rand seen his character sheet?
I don't know if he's looked at it.
He has yet.
I know there are people who have seen it, but Rand I don't think has actually looked at his character sheet.
Okay. I'm just curious. So it's one of the curveballs they threw me. They're like, here's a list of characters we need made for this stuff that we're working on, and I was like, Rand Miller is a name on this list. And Ellery's like, yes. Yeah. And I'm like, he's real. I don't understand. And she's like, do your job. And I was like, all right, fuck. Wait a minute.
That may have been paraphrased.
Right. So I ended up having to I wrote him like I would write a character in a role-playing game, right? Yeah. So he has a character sheet. And I was just curious if he'd seen it.
We did get another question. I think this is another one from Aussie. As someone who deals with chronic health issues and lack of spoons, how do you plan your games in such a way as to allow you flexibility for if your game lands on a bad day, pain day, or some such?
Oh wow, yeah, that's a great question. It's all about, for me, it's all about setting expectations a lot with everybody else in the group, right? I mean, it's just sort of like getting together in a focused activity group to do anything. I mean, you could be talking about a knitting circle, you could be talking about a whatever, right? And there has to be part of any of that, if you're going to do it well, right? I think has to be a compassionate human conversation about what the different needs and stuff of all of the participants are. I can tell you that the gaming group, my regular gaming group, as an example, actually meets every Friday during this time. And one of the things that we realized very quickly in front, because people have young children, and some other folks are deal with some other stuff. Some folks have mental health stuff that they struggle with. That we needed to reframe the group as really being a social group that does role-playing games rather than a role-playing game group, in order to give permission, not permission, but to make people not feel uncomfortable with the idea of coming to the group and saying, hey, I'm having a depressive day, I really don't know if I can if I can do this, if I can do the gaming thing and participate, but I would still like to talk to everybody and blah blah blah, and so we'll just get around and talk for the time.
Mhm.
And like that's my biggest piece of advice is to make sure that the group sets expectations with each other about people's needs. Some groups I know have a very loose structure for their games, such that people can dip in and out if needed, and then the rest of the group can run that night. Or they have one thing that I know some groups do is there's an alternate game. So if certain people are not able to make it because they're dealing with health issues or whatever, the rest of the participants play a different game that week, so that when the person's able to come back, then they can continue on with the usual game. But a lot of it is just setting expectations correctly and being compassionate adults about it to people.
Yeah.
Like that's not I feel like that sounds really basic, but I mean
That's
that's
really
a
the
lot
core
what
of
it is,
it, though. Yeah,
right?
be a
Like,
compassionate human being towards your
right,
fellow human beings.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Be excellent to each other.
Mhm.
right.
I think also you can add to that is that the prototypical, we meet once a week or twice a week to sit around the table and roll our dice is not the only way that you can role play.
Right.
I mean, not just but you can also kind of move back and forth between venues. It's like, okay,
Right.
we're tired this week. Why don't we just pass some emails back and forth, or we'll chat about things and sort of we moved a month ahead, and you were over here doing this, and I was over here doing that. So there's still you can engage in the game in many different ways, and you don't have
Right.
to choose one.
Well, and that's also, I mean, we're all social distancing and whatnot now, so obviously gaming online, video conferencing and stuff has also become very common, right? Like that's also an option of I don't know if I have the spoons to get up out of my house and go to another house and sit there and concentrate on a thing.
Mm.
But if I don't have to get up and I can, game on the audio, be on headset, with my robe and my hot toddy and all that, I can totally game then, right? It's just a matter of sort of checking in with yourself, but recognizing, V, I think it's a really good point. Is that uh, setting yourselves up so that you can engage the game in a variety of different ways is also a good way to handle that.
Yeah.
We got another question. Is do you all use Zoom for gaming at this time? Where else do you go?
There are so many.
Yeah. What we
Zoom,
did with
Meet,
go ahead.
Zoom, Google Meet, Roll20. There's a lot of really nice online gaming resources. Some of them are simple, some of them are really fancy. Roll20 is kind of the big one.
Right.
Other ones,
that's super fancy. Like it has dice rollers and you can put maps and stuff on a virtual tabletop that all y'all are looking at.
Oh yeah, you can do all sorts of stuff. Actually, we did a lot of our alpha testing in Roll20 for Unwritten.
I these days tend to use Discord.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to set up. Like our group set up a Friday night gaming group Discord server.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody just kind of joined on that. There's dice rolling bots that you can put in Discord. And then the other piece of tech is a shared Google drawing that we use as the virtual tabletop to
Mm-hmm.
because the game that we're playing right now has tokens and stuff, and you need to move them around, and so we at least need a visual thing of who has blah many tokens and stuff like that. So that's mostly Discord and Google Drawings. A combination of those two things is my personal go-to, just because that server functionality makes it so nice, because you can leave stuff you know, you make a Discord server, it has that main chat. You can just put media in there and like,
Yeah.
and, like they start running. Then you can like keep a running archive of
Mhm.
stuff. It's really easy. Oh, you run into the bartender at the the thirsty emu looks like this, and then you put up a picture of Armand Sante or whoever
Mhm.
it is that you want to have look like the thing, and then they can just scroll and be like, yeah, the bartender later, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I use.
In the shameless self-promotion category, we've actually set up the Unwritten Discord to have a couple of game tables and game side chat tables
You
that
have
people can request
what?
and say we want to use the Unwritten Discord to play a game of Unwritten.
Yeah.
I
And then,
see that now. I'm looking at it now. Game table one. This place has escalated quickly.
yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have a dice roll bot yet, but I'm working on that.
Yeah. On my wish list, since this was the question I was going to throw at you two, on my wish list is I want a fate dice roller in the key in Myst Online.
Yes.
I
would love to see
one
that
of you
functionality.
people,
And it should be easy.
Wow.
yeah. I want a dice roller in Uru.
It should be easy. The Uru client is mostly Python, and there's a really great Python library for dice rolling. It's really, it's like, it's a sort of, it's really, up there in terms of like it takes care of like every sort of dice rolling, exploding 10 dice and number of successes and keep high, low, all kinds of stuff.
I want to be able to sit in Dakota Alley and play a game of Unwritten.
So for the Guild of Writers and hackers out there, there you go.
There's
that is the most specific feature request for a piece of software I think I've ever heard in my life. That's amazing.
Play in the cavern, really.
Yeah.
I mean that does sound pretty cool.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Shogun, we really, really want this.
Yeah, make sure that Ellery does not test that part though. She'll break it. Ellery broke Myst Online a couple times.
I did. I broke Myst Online.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I did something about the way I was linking in and trying to get into a neighborhood broke the vault in on the tapestry shard, and I logged in and I have this message on my imager on my Relto from Eric Lager, who is the shard owner, going, "Don't touch anything, don't link anywhere." Like,
because every time she would link, the vault would crash.
Yeah, every time I would link, the entire vault would crash.
So,
they had to reboot the entire server.
That I feel like we need to take this and adapt it into a storyline for the
Into a
there you
storyline.
go, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I like that.
The
Ellery Blake
gates
break
of linking.
Right? Yeah.
So what? So while we're talking about this pie in the sky stuff, pie in the sky, we can do anything we want with Unwritten. What would you do with it? I want LARP rules.
I mean, that's reasonable. I don't even consider that pie in the sky. Like that's not.
Yeah.
That's not hard. I actually
that's roadmap. That's not pie. That's roadmap.
I mean, if you want LARP rules, I mean, we should talk because I know a team that could do it for you. Like, I know exactly who I would recommend that you retain for that.
But I would like to see something. I would like to be able to see kind of support for running Unwritten in different places, like seeing the actual roller in Myst Online or in the on the shards, but also like actively supporting people doing their own things on the Myst. I mean, I just kind of want to see it everywhere, and I want to make it. I want to take my whack at how Uru should have run.
Gary.
So, and not just technically speaking, but not just technically speaking, but in terms of lots of people having their own stories that are all part of a bigger story.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's pie in the sky. Is I want to blow it away, and I want to go. Let's let's change narrative history, and let's do it this way.
Yeah. What do you want, Lenny?
You know what I think would be really interesting is some kind of a format for organized play. I think that it would be really interesting to take like to make really elaborate ages, for example. They're almost like what an age in a Myst game would be, except you don't need level builders and coders and stuff like that, because you just have to design it and to take it to on the convention circuit, right? And so the idea would be that there's a network of convention games of Unwritten, but they are all sort of groups of explorers trying to solve pieces of a mega age, right?
Ooh.
And
Ooh.
so one convention would get this piece of it, right? And that's your thing. And then these other teams, just to see sort of how long it takes for different groups of people at different conventions to solve enough of the age that a group can actually finish the rest of it, right? And I have a couple of ideas, a couple of design ideas for stuff like that, but also just the idea of getting an Unwritten, a presence for Unwritten in convention play in the same way that you had the old RPGA and Pathfinder does.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I mean, obviously it's pie in the sky because the staffing you need to do that is just a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of logistically. It's a lot. But that would be kind of neat, especially if there was a way of carrying forward changes that people made to an age. It'd be interesting if a group of explorers at one convention did this thing, and then the person who ran it sends the notes of what happened in the game back to headquarters. Headquarters changes the module, the adventure, and then the next group of explorers that come into it is and while you're passing by this tree, there's a goat. Somebody has scratched "eat a goat" into the railing of this thing. And that was something that a player did in a previous. So there'd be a way to propagate changes to the ages over time. Or something. Another cooperative example would be there's an organized writing program for people that build ages, and then a play program where people play the ages that the other people built, right? Kind of a thing, right? So it's sort of you would get together in one convention, and there'd be a writers meeting, and you would collaboratively create an age and create stuff in it, send it back to headquarters cleans it up, sends it to the next convention down the line, and that's the first group of explorers that goes into that place.
That's cool.
Archive it all on a wiki or something so that everybody can sort of look at what everybody's done and create a community thing around it. Am I done? Is this pie in the sky? I'm trying to shoot high.
No, I love this, and don't we have an Unwritten section on the Guild of Archivists yet?
Something that somebody in the chat mentioned, whose username I'm not going to be able to pronounce, talked about the pod age and how in Uru they're trying. The pod age seemed to be more of the community. It was not intended for a small group or community. It was for a small group or a person. It was intended to be a community puzzle. And I think that's dead on. And a lot of people didn't like the pod ages because they couldn't do it by themselves. And if they came in late, then all the other players had already figured it out, sort of thing. But I always thought that it was an excellent example of a community level activity.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I remember people, like doing things like sitting in, coming back to one of the pods like every hour and taking screenshots of what they saw out the window, and then using that to go, okay, look, over this period of time, the the sky is getting darker at a regular rate, so we know that there's a there's a time thing involved here, and that
Right.
and I really always thought that sort of community wide puzzle solving, problem solving thing was really fascinating. You see it a lot in like ARGs and such.
Yeah, ARG. I think the idea of ARGs and the idea of collaborative unwritten are pretty compatible.
Right.
I think that would be awesome.
I don't know if we had any other questions.
Yeah.
So I think we maybe at a good place, unless somebody's got some last minute questions. We'll see. Those come up on thing, but
you can always still throw them at us on Twitter. Feel free to join the Discord. Somebody throw that link up. Gary's got the
yeah, the Unwritten RPG Discord, which is separate than the Cyan Chat one. But join both. If the third person gets into Discords, both are great.
Go buy Unwritten. It's on the digital copies and the digital PDF of the main book. All of the supplements that exist are available on the Cyan store. There's also the short story by award-winning author David D. Levine. That's now available for free on the Cyan store. That was originally just for our backers. And we threw together a coloring book because why not?
Yeah.
Because pandemic boredom.
Yeah.
But there's some art in there that we haven't used in publication yet, including some examples of what Denis clothing might look like that just make me very, very happy. From Tazio Benton, actually. So, and he does really good RPG work. So, somebody cosplay those.
Yeah.
Gene.
Get Jean and Riven Chan and Elliot and
yeah.
Parker.
Pineapple. Yeah.
Pineapple Parker. Yeah. Get the cosplayers in. Let's get this done.
Get this done.
Well,
yeah.
Well,
thank
you for coming. Remember once again that we're doing this to also to support the Navajo Nation COVID-19 Relief Fund. So if you can, please go ahead and help them out. They're they're one of the places that just isn't getting a lot of support. So and also of course Uru has a sort of indirect connection to to the indigenous peoples of that area by the fact that the cavern is under them. So we kind of want to highlight their struggles and their needs. So if you can give a little bit, please do. If you can't, don't feel bad about it. But pass the link around, point people to it, that sort of thing. Buy all of Cyan's stuff. Make sure they get rich. That's important because then they'll make more games. Yeah.
Including more written stuff. Maybe.
Last comments. Lenny.
Oh, yeah. Just thanks for having me. This is super cool. I can say honestly that getting the opportunity to work on this will always be one of the highlights of my career. I've been lucky. I've had some big gets, like working on intellectual properties in my time. I've written for Star Wars. I've written for the Dresden Files. I've written for a couple of other things, but like Myst was always near and dear to my heart. So the being able to work on it was a huge win for me, and continues to be a source of joy in my life. So thank you for that, and all of y'all who support the game. I'm glad you're here.
Ellery, last comment.
Yay you, yay us.
Missed.
Yay Myst. Keep telling stories. That's why we're here. Is because I mean, that's why we called it Unwritten, is because the ending isn't ever.
Okay. All right, thanks for coming. And also wait before we go. Thank you to Gary for running the tech on this once again.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Um,
Yes.
And Gary is kind of often our behind the scenes person who's also working with Inkworks. Thank you for Ocelot for also keeping an eye on the chat and helping things go there.
Yep.
Sweet.
And now you can cut us off.
Now you can. Yeah. Now you can.
Turn it off. All right.